We made it. It was another crazy weekend. We were actually in Edmonton this weekend.
That was a lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun. We got to see a lot of people that are in the Wealth Genius community that we've never met in person. I actually got to meet 3 of my students in person for the first time ever, which was really cool because I've been talking to them for a year. I think a year actually for most of them, and I'd never met them in person. It'd always been over Zoom. So it was really cool to actually get to see them in person and talk to them in person.
Yeah.
Because it's not quite the same when you're always on Zoom. So that was cool. The travel itself was a little bit wild. That's okay. My luggage got sent to Yellowknife, of all places. I had to go and buy a new outfit for the first day of the boot camp because I got to Edmonton and my bag wasn't there and they couldn't figure out where the heck my bag was.
It looked like it never left Ottawa.
Yeah, like, because you can tell now if it's like been scanned onto the plane, if it's been scanned off the plane, if it's going to be showing up on the conveyor belt, and it didn't come. And I went to go and talk to them, and they're like, "We don't know where it is. It looks like it's still sitting in Ottawa." And a couple hours later, I got a call from Yellowknife, of all places, and I actually didn't answer it because I thought it was spam. Because why the heck would someone from Yellowknife be calling me? And then I was watching the speak to text when they're leaving you a message, and all I saw was bag. And I was like, "Oh my god, they have I think it's with my bag." So I answer it, and sure enough, they're like, "Hey, we have your bag in Yellowknife. Did you ever plan to come to Yellowknife?" I was like, "No, I'm in Edmonton."
Well, it still had the bag tag on it, the original one to say Ottawa to Edmonton.
Yeah.
So
she was pretty funny. She was like,
yeah.
"I guess you didn't ever plan to come to Yellowknife." I was like, "No, I mean not ever, but like not this weekend."
Yeah.
But anyways, that was a little wild. But
on the way back was somewhat uneventful, but there were some other issues with the flights. So the whole itinerary was a little wild. But we made it back. We are here. We're here for 3 days, and then we're back on the road again. We are going to Winnipeg for a multifamily boot camp. So if you are in Winnipeg, reach out. We'd love to see you there.
Yeah.
There's a few seats. We can get you in.
So yeah, a lot of traveling these days. But we are here obviously for our power lunch today. It's glad that we were able to be home, to be able to do this, and we're trying to make it more consistent because I know for a while we were a little bit on and off, but we're doing our best. So for those of you that have been here before, welcome back. For those of you that have not been here before, welcome. My name is Dakota.
My name is Jeff. I thought you were going to introduce me.
I
was ready for it.
It's been a long weekend, I know, but hopefully you haven't forgotten your name.
No.
And we are Opinicon Investments. That is our investing company, our acquisitions company.
Yeah.
And we do these power lunches every week, as much as we possibly can, on Tuesdays at 12:30 Eastern. And we talk about a new topic every week. Sometimes it's stuff that our students are going through. Sometimes it's stuff that we're going through. Sometimes it's a topic someone has sent us that they want us to talk about. And I think we have a pretty fun topic today.
Yeah, it's a little bit different. If you're here watching this live, we want this to be as interactive as possible. So put your comments, questions, whatever, in the chat. We'll be reading the chat throughout this. So if you do have something to add, we'll talk about it. Otherwise, we'll just kind of go back.
Or just say hi. Even if
you
just
say hi
say
if you're here.
Please say hi.
Share it with your friends.
Yeah, we started out having these very structured with like a presentation and stuff, and then we realized that we should just be getting on here, talking about the topic, interacting with whoever's with us, and we found that more fun.
Yeah, less of a presentation, more of just
banter.
I guess so.
Yeah.
But yes, today we are talking about the art of the deal.
Yeah.
Let's face it, if you're just looking on realtor.ca and you're underwriting a deal, it's probably not going to look very good. I think it's probably going to be very red. It's going to be negative cash flow. Your return on investment will probably actually be negative.
And if you've ever underwritten anything on Realtor, that's the case.
Yeah. I find that the magic number seems to be about $1 million overpriced.
Depending on the size you're looking at. If your building's
Yes.
if you're looking at something that is $1 million, it's probably not $1 million
Oh, they
overpriced.
probably want $2 million for it.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's very common that things don't necessarily work at first glance.
Yeah.
They can be close, but it's common that things don't work at first glance.
Yeah.
And there's another level of like sophistication that you can bring to a deal, and this is something that we've learned over the last 2 years, especially. I mean, we've been investing for a couple years now, but it was really over the last 2 years that we started to really like hone in on this, especially from the teachings from Wealth Genius and our mentor Alfonso. He's actually the one that I'd give credit to the idea of the art of the deal. He's the one that kind of taught us that concept.
Yeah, it's easy to learn how to underwrite, especially with tools out there, spreadsheets. There's different applications you can use that help you underwrite. As long as you have all of the numbers, you can punch those numbers in, and that's easy. It'll spit out whether or not it's cash flowing. It'll spit out what the cap rate is. It'll spit out what your return over a projected period of time is.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
But what happens when it's red?
Yeah.
Like, do you just stop there? I would say most people do. But what we've learned is the best deals are not found. Like, you're not just going to find it on Realtor. The best deals are actually created.
And I want to take a step back because you brought up a really good point that, there's so many tools out there to help you underwrite. There's programs. You can make a spreadsheet. You can use someone else's spreadsheet. I've heard of programs that, I guess the one we use kind of does this, but you just like punch in the numbers and it gives you like red light, yellow light, or a green light, which, I mean, I hope for most of you drive, so you understand what each one means. And that's the tool. And I think what a lot of people don't know is the understanding of like what those deals or what those numbers mean. So just throwing in numbers and then having it spew back at you red or green, that's great for the program, and I guess it's okay for you, but if you don't understand why it's red and why it's green, being a sophisticated investor and being a sophisticated deal creator isn't going to work very well, because you need to understand why those numbers aren't working. You need to understand what's causing things not to work. Is it the actual numbers? Is it the expenses? Are the expenses really high? The income's good, but the expenses are high. Maybe expenses and income are decent, but your debt servicing is really high. So, there are a lot of great programs out there, but if you don't understand what those numbers actually mean, then you're going to have a really hard time being creative and being a sophisticated investor. And I have a hard time with those programs that give like the red light, green light, because I think that's really giving off, a kind of a bad, I don't want to say bad, maybe a bad impression of what the deal could be, and then a lack of understanding of what's actually happening in the underwriting. So use those programs, but use them and understand where the numbers are coming from and understand what's causing the deal not to be as beneficial. Yeah. So that's my advice for that. Because I was talking to someone this weekend and they were like, yeah, it's great. It just tells me if it works or not. I'm like, yeah, but do you know why it works or why it doesn't work?
Yeah, I think understanding what's wrong with it, like you can identify if it's overpriced. You can identify if the income is low, right? There's certain things that you need to understand. You need to understand what is market rent in that area. You need to understand what the expected cap rate is. Like, there's a lot of elements that you should understand. And without having that full picture, it doesn't really mean much when it says that the deal does or doesn't work.
Yeah.
Exactly. Are you expecting a specific type of financing? Or can you get creative and actually come out with some form of a solution?
So that actually brings kind of the first step. So you type it in, you type in your numbers, you throw it into whatever spreadsheet or whatever program you're using. and it comes up red, what are the first things that you look at to see, okay, what's going on in this deal? Like, what are some of the indicators that you look at?
Well, it depends on how red. Sometimes one thing that I mean, everybody kind of makes mistakes when you're entering numbers in through these. There's a lot of things where you can enter your expenses in per month or per year.
I've done that many a times.
If you are extremely red, there's probably a mistake in entry somewhere where you set an annual amount of like your hydro or your utilities is actually a monthly amount, and it just destroys it entirely.
Mm-hmm.
So look for any errors, first of all, that you may have made.
Yep, that's I've done the annual expense to monthly and gotten to the end
too
of
many
it
times.
like, ooh, what happened?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a really good point. Go back and make sure that you're checking. And this comes back to understanding why it's red, because if you see, like, if you're going through this and you have a good understanding of underwriting and of where these numbers are coming from, and you get to the end and it's really wrong or really, really right, and you're shocked, if you understand underwriting, you can probably go back and see where you went wrong.
Actually, that's a good point. I don't know if I've ever made that mistake in the reverse, but yeah, if it's really, really right and the deal looks extremely good, you may have done that in the reverse, where a monthly amount, you put it as an annual amount, so it's not really calculated properly.
Yeah. So that's actually, that's a very good first step, is just go back and again, see where you may have made an error, and it really helps if you understand the underwriting at that point.
Yeah.
And then one of my favorite things to go back and check is not go back and check, but to look at as far as indicators go, is the cap rate. So once you've figured out that your underwriting is correct, look at the cap rate. And I like to say there's kind of two different cap rates that you're looking at. You have cap rate for your building, like what that's looking like, and the cap rate for your area. So you need to know the cap rate for your area. This is something that you'll get to know as you work in the area more, but a lot of people will reference, they'll go to realtors in the area that know the multifamily space really well, or appraisers, because they're the ones that are actually utilizing the cap rate to determine value of buildings. So they're a really great resource. But once you know the cap rate for your area and the cap rate for your building, you can kind of look at those two and compare and say, okay, if the cap rate for my building is far lower than the cap rate for what this product should be in this area, then you know that it's probably overpriced. And this comes back to, again, understanding the actual underwriting and the numbers. If the cap rate for the building is equal to the cap rate for the area, then it's probably priced appropriately. And then if it's higher, which I have yet to see, but if the cap rate for your building is higher than the cap rate for the area, then your building is actually priced very reasonably for that area.
That was a lot of the word cap rate. So this is going to be on YouTube. You can pause, rewind, and go back and listen to that if needed.
I think we have a video more on cap rates as well.
We also have that.
Go back and take a look at that.
Mark Andre, hello. You got a good question here. So to confirm the numbers, do you usually call around to get an accurate number, or do you ballpark the expenses? Great question. We will typically ballpark, but this is based off of experience. If you can't even ballpark it, then I would say call around and get quotes. Thinking about like snow removal, call some snow removal companies and find out how much how much it would cost, and see if the numbers that you have are accurate. I would say that calling around and getting quotes, for the most part, we do it during the due diligence phase. So we'll ballpark insurance, for example, and then when we get the deal under contract and we're going through the due diligence, then we'll actually get a quote from our broker to find out how much is insurance going to be for this building, so that we can confirm those numbers.
But again, that's because we've done a lot of underwriting.
Yeah.
And a lot of underwriting in very specific areas. So we know typically what prices are going to be in that area. So we've kind of allowed that space for us to ballpark because we've done so much underwriting. And that comes with just putting the work in and doing it over and over and over again, because you're going to see different buildings with different expenses. Yeah. Some expenses should come from the seller. So it's not that you have to call, call for every single expense. A lot of them should come from the seller, whether they're accurate to what's actually happening in the building. You have to figure that out during your due diligence period when you actually get like their bills and all that stuff. But some will actually come from the seller.
Yeah, we'll typically, when we're initially underwriting it, we'll use all of their numbers. Unless something is way off, then like if their insurance is extremely low compared to what we think it should be, then we'll probably bump that up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But there's nothing wrong with utilizing their numbers, then getting the deal under contract and then verifying. So again, trust but verify, I think is the best way to put it here.
Mm-hmm.
Trust that the numbers they've given you are accurate, but then before you actually go and close on the deal, verify that those numbers are accurate and that's what you'll be paying for insurance. That's what you'll be paying for snow removal.
Yeah.
That's what you'll be paying for accounting and legal fees and all of this stuff.
Yeah. It's important to remember that this is a business. This is going to be a business for you. Yeah. So you want to look at it as, how will I be running this business? Because they may have been running the business their own way. Maybe they were managing and not paying themselves for management. Maybe they had their like son or daughter cutting the grass every summer and they were giving them like a weekly allowance to do that. Like that's great for them, but is that how you're going to be running the building? So I think that's a big part, even like from the perspective of the art of the deal, is remembering that it's a business and that you need to know how you are going to be running it, not necessarily how the seller was running it.
That's right. What are your operational costs versus what theirs are? They could have a blanket insurance policy over multiple buildings and their premium is greatly reduced, right? And maybe if you don't have that, then you're not going to have such a discount or whatever. Same with even, mortgage financing. You're probably going to be getting your own anyways. So,
but even like,
but they could have a blanket mortgage.
Snow removal, lawn care, all of these contracts, if they have multiple buildings and they can spread it across multiple buildings, typically their costs are going to be lower. So that's important for you to keep in mind, because you want to make sure that the business costs make sense for the way you're going to be running the business.
Hopefully we answered your question.
Yeah. Okay. So kind of back to understanding the underwriting and some of the like key things to look at. I think cap rate is the biggest one that I look at, just to get an idea of where we're at with the building and what could be causing the deal not to make sense. Because if the deal isn't cash flowing, but it looks like, your cap rates are about this, like the cap rate for the building makes sense for the cap rate for the area, the first thing I'm going to start looking at is my financing, because especially, this has been a problem for the last, year. It's already been like a year and a half.
Oh, the rise of interest rates?
I can't believe it's been that long ago already.
Yeah.
But financing increased. So having like the debt servicing piece got a little bit more expensive. So then you go back and you look at, okay, so the building itself is actually operating pretty well compared to the area. What can I do from a financing perspective? And that's where you start to think of, maybe you put a little bit more of a down payment in, so you have a little bit less as far as debt that you have to cover. And the thing to remember is that as long as you're buying the deal at an appropriate price, is putting a little bit more money in right now to make it work, especially when you're in the long game. When you're looking at owning this building for 20, 30 years, if you put a little bit extra down up front to make the deal work, that money's not going anywhere. Like, it's not like you're putting it out there and it's disappearing. Obviously, we don't like having a bunch of money locked into a deal, and you don't want to go to an extreme where you're putting a ton of money down to lock it up. But if you have to do a little bit more for the interim, for the deal to work for the first couple of years, maybe that's okay. Maybe that's worthwhile.
Yeah, and then if interest rates come down and you get to the point where you're able to do a refinance, then you end up getting that capital back out, because you've put in capital that's now sitting there and safe and secure. One thing that I will say is, on the flip side of that, if you're trying to do every deal with just like 5% down and your debt service ends up being expensive because of that, because you're paying more in insurance, interest, that interest is gone. You're not getting that interest back, right? So if you put more money in, you can get that money back later. If you put a lot of leverage on the deal, everything you pay in interest is gone.
Mhm.
So keep that in mind.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not saying that 5% down isn't a great thing. It's a great opportunity, but it may not be a great opportunity for every single deal you
Mhm.
do. And that's where understanding these different options for a deal is really important. And we could talk about the art of the deal for days because there's so many different avenues you can go down. Like for one deal, 5% down might make sense. For another deal, 25% down might make sense. And both can be good deals. It's just what's good for that deal in particular. Um, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think back to kind of where I was. I think that's the biggest thing is like looking at the debt servicing. You could also look at, what kind of creative financing can we do? If the debt is really expensive, that like the traditional debt, is there something else that we could do to make that work? Maybe they have an assumable mortgage that is at a lower interest rate and has a couple of years left on it. Maybe you can do something like a vendor take back if that's what's going to make the deal work. Maybe you can do something like an agreement for sale. This is really good especially if the person wants a higher purchase price and you can't fill that gap, but you know that there's value add potential that you can do over the next little while. Maybe an agreement for sale is what you need to do to be able to get it at or above the price that they want. So, understanding these different opportunities to get the deal done can be really powerful so that you're not just looking at the lens of I've put the numbers in, it's now red, we're over with the deal.
Mhm.
These are all the things that start going through our heads when we look at a deal that's negative.
Yeah, ultimately we ask ourselves, okay, the deal doesn't work at face value. What do I need to do to make this a good deal?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And that could be as simple as lowering the purchase price. That's kind of a very easy portion of it, but it's going to be hard to negotiate if there isn't a whole lot of logic with it. But yeah, looking at different financing, looking at different amounts that you're going to put down on the deal, and then creative strategies. We talk about this all the time, having different tools in your tool belt, right? Different strategies that you can pull out to essentially create a good deal and solve a problem.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's ultimately what we're trying to do.
Yeah. So these are all thought processes that we go through once when we realize the deal is red. And I will say that there are some deals that are so red that I won't look at because, like, maybe it's not to say I won't look at it. At that point, you have to get a price reduction. For a lot of them, we will do a price reduction plus some of these different opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
But there are some that are so far off, and I have a quick conversation with the seller, and I'm like, this is going nowhere. So, it's not that you can't make a deal out of every single property. But I think the point is don't necessarily just stop when it's red.
Yeah. I mean, I've said this before. Just because it's for sale doesn't mean they want to sell it.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, they might just be putting it on the market to see what they can get. Hopefully, somebody will pay that top dollar that they're hoping to get, but they're willing to just keep the property. So there's no motivations with the seller and the sale of this deal.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We often will have discussions with the seller to really try and unpack what is their motivation, why are they truly selling, and then we can help solve a problem if maybe their mortgage is up for renewal and they don't want to renew it because of whatever, or there's the owner is dying and they don't want to hand the building down or whatever, right? There could be many reasons on why somebody's looking to sell, and you need to understand what that is so that you can apply the right strategy to the deal.
So doing good discovery, kind of like thing one.
Yes, absolutely.
Doing good discovery, doing the underwriting and figuring out what you can kind of do to make the deal work. The other thing when you're doing the underwriting is understanding the plan for the deal. Like understanding what you're going to be doing. Is it a buy and hold where you're expecting it to basically work from day one? There's not a ton of big renovations that you're going to be doing. It's going to be cash flowing from day one. So in that type of a deal, you might not get super high cash flow depending on what area you're looking in, but it's going to work from day one. So there's a little bit less as far as risk goes because you're not relying on a big turnover. So you might be able to accept, you know, a little bit less cash flow because you know that this is a long-term game. Maybe you underwrite the deal and hi Sean. Maybe you underwrite the deal and you know the cash flow is slim, or you know I always like my deals to at least cash flow a little bit day one, but maybe it's slim. But you're looking at this deal and you're like, oh, there's opportunity to add units. It's coming with like
Mm-hmm.
the owner has left some units vacant so that the oncoming buyer can rent those out. You're looking at it and maybe there's huge gaps between market rent and where they're actually sitting as far as rent goes, especially if you're in a province that doesn't have so much difficulty with turning tenants over. So maybe you see a ton of opportunity in this deal to increase the value of it. So you're okay with initially having, you know, kind of skimming through with cash flow, knowing that over the next couple of months, you can skyrocket the value of the building, skyrocket cash flow, and it's going to be a very, very well performing building. So you have to really understand what your plan is with the deal, because if with that deal, you just look at it for face value from day one, it's probably not going to look very sexy.
Yeah.
But if you do your projections and you know I can add 4 units to this property and now the value is going to increase by $1 million and my cash flow is going to increase by, I don't know, $6,000 a month, now it's looking really good and I know for sure I can add those units to that property. So it's really important to understand what your plan is with the deal when you're doing that underwriting.
Yeah. Well, and then understanding what your exits are. But that's going down a different topic, I think. But having multiple exit strategies is really important when you're going through your underwriting and due diligence process.
Yeah. So I guess that's kind of step. I didn't realize I started making steps now, but I guess here we are. So doing your discovery so that you can be creative through the process, so you can solve the problem. Doing your underwriting, kind of figuring out why things, like where the gap is, where it's not working, and then actually truly understanding what your plan is with the deal. And I think from there, a big part of it is negotiating.
Yeah.
It's kind of one of your last, not last, but one of the last puzzle pieces to being creative.
Yeah. Being able to negotiate with logic and reason. This is a skill set that will take you far. Right? This is something that you really need to understand how to do well in this business. I mean, all deals are negotiated, right?
Mm-hmm. So having different negotiation tools and understanding kind of when to bring those out, when it's appropriate. I know one of our favorite ones is the love letter, which I know we've talked about before.
If you don't know what that is, reach out to us and we can teach you what the love letter is.
Yeah. It's one of our favorite strategies, but having, again, tools in your tool belt. Now we're talking about negotiation tools. Having different negotiation tools in your tool belt so that you can say, okay, we are here with the offer and I think I want to be around here. So we need to negotiate things through the process to be able to get us here. And there's different stages that you can kind of do that. But again, you have to have the logic and reason behind it. And that's really important.
Yeah.
You don't want to just be negotiating for the sake of negotiating to get the lowest price possible for absolutely no reason, because no one's going to want to work with you again. So
that's right.
Yeah. I think that's pretty well kind of the art of the deal. I think what it comes down to is obviously not just stopping when the deal is read.
Yeah. Ask yourself the question, how can I make this work? Mm-hmm. Like, what do I need to do? And do I fully understand this deal and all of the different elements of it, and why it doesn't work? Yeah. I think understanding why it doesn't work will help you create a deal that does work.
Yeah. And once you have a good understanding of these different elements of underwriting, elements of different types of deals, elements of creative financing, elements of negotiation, once you have a good understanding of all of these pieces and you can bring them all together, your level of sophistication as an investor increases significantly. And you can look at deals in ways that nobody else can. And it does take practice. For us, it took a lot of education, a lot of guidance, and a lot of practice. So just getting out there, taking what we had learned from our coach and our community, actually applying it to what we were doing, going out, taking the action, doing a ton of underwriting, and our level of sophistication built as we continue to do that.
And the more you do it, the more comfortable you get with it as well, right? So being able to ballpark numbers like we talked about earlier, it's only because we've underwritten so many deals and underwritten so many deals in kind of the same area that we're able to look at underwriting and say, okay, this number is way off. I need to adjust this, or just be able to ballpark numbers.
So education, community, and practice. Action, not just practicing on fake numbers, like actually looking at real buildings, real numbers. That's what's going to make this change, and your level of sophistication will through the roof.
On the same topic of practice, I mean, it's going to give you a better ability to ballpark numbers. The more deals you look at, you'll start to see trends. You'll start to see kind of, okay, this is how much insurance typically costs on a building this size, right? You'll see a variation of numbers, but you can use that to help you with that ballpark.
Yeah. So if you have any questions, if this level of sophistication is something that you want to bring to your deals, to your investing, make sure you reach out. We can help at least start that conversation and give you some advice on how we were able to learn these things, these pieces. And it'll take you far. So I think that's that for Art of the Deal.
That is the art of the deal.
We hope that added another level of sophistication to your underwriting and your investing. And we will be here. We should be here again next week. So Tuesdays, 12:30 Eastern, we do our power lunch right here on Facebook and then also on YouTube. We watch comments on both. So if you ever want to find us on either platform, you can do that. You can also share this. There's a YouTube link afterwards. So the whole history of our power lunches is on our YouTube. So feel free to share those with your friends if you think that this would be beneficial to somebody else. Make sure you share it with them.
Yeah. If you subscribe to our YouTube as well, you'll get notified when we do go live.
Otherwise,
we'll see you in the next one.